Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons and Tory MP, formerly for the Ribble Valley. Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Jeremy?
Oh, my God, you're in another place now. You've got a job in a library. What's going on?
This is the home of Colonel Bob Stewart, my wonderful, wonderful friend who was an MP up until the last election. And so I'm at his house.
Excellent. For dinner? I don't even ask. Now, I just want to see your face when we're doing this, Nige. I'd like your take on the reform debacle. I had Matt Vickers on earlier, who could barely contain a grin, but I'm going to try this from a different angle, because you and John have really garnered support on this station as two ex-Tory MPs who come on and don't make excuses and are quite straight with what you think. And I think that's what the audience wants. I have heard repeated words from Tory HQ that Kemi Badenoch is taking her time and thinking about the mistakes that were made and working out a strategy, and today we heard something about deporting foreign criminals. But to me, this is a golden opportunity to grasp the narrative, the ear of the British public, and be quite loud and quite brash and say what she thinks. Nothing. Reform is really struggling. If you were still a Tory, would you not be advocating that now is the time to stand up and say, look, we haven't had your ear for a year, we messed up, probably not for 2 or 3 years. This is where we think they've gone wrong and this is what we do differently.
I totally agree with you. It shouldn't take months to work out what we did wrong. I could work out what we did wrong during the general election campaign, and calling it in July when we could have gone in October and November when Nigel Farage would have been in America covering the American elections was the first mistake. Announcing it in the rain was the second mistake. And daily there were mistakes that were made. So I don't think it's rocket science to work out where we went wrong. We know where we went wrong. And what we are now lacking is policies where people can go, absolutely. At least I can now say the Tory party are back in town. We've got this one opportunity where there's internecine warfare amongst the 5 members of Parliament that represent reform. We've got this one opportunity where we can now say we are the established alternative with policies that we went wayward for the past few years. We are back in town. Kemi hasn't got the luxury of months, I can tell you now. We've got the May elections looming. We've got that by-election when Mike Amesbury resigns. I assume that will be on the same day as the local elections. And then, of course, there may be other by-elections. And then next year, you've got the Welsh Assembly, the Scottish Parliament, and they are clearly in the sights of reform. So I don't actually agree totally with Rupert Lowe, by the way, when he gives no credit to Nigel Farage for being the, and I actually see messianic sometimes actually as a positive thing, not a negative thing. And without Nigel Farage leading them into that last election, I think they would have got half the votes they got.
No reform without Nigel, but of course the questions with their silence, their choice, with their silence has come further questions. And is it about ego? Is Rupert Lowe after the job? Did it start when Musk said Farage needs to go and Rupert Lowe is the man? We've had the accusations. There's a police investigation being launched today. And yet, here's the interesting thing, Nige. Actually, 7 members of his staff in Parliament, this statement today saying, actually, he's one of the nicest people that we've ever worked for. And we had to work for Nigel Evans, who was a nightmare. No, I made that bit up. But the truth of the matter is, they seem to be shooting themselves in the foot. And that, from my point of view, in terms of many people phoning this show across the day, from Mike in the morning, they're all been saying the same thing. We feel let down. We genuinely felt after the last election that this was an alternative that we wanted to consider, something we could believe in after the debacle of the Tory demise. We don't like Labour, we don't trust the Socialists, and I think a lot of people feel let down. For me, here's the million-dollar question. I wonder whether you'll answer it. I think the Tories, I don't think they've been vocal enough. I'm sorry, I don't see her lasting till Christmas. I think you made a massive mistake not voting for Robert Jenrick by an absolute merry mile. And to me, he's the one who found out on a couple of these things, pieces of policy. To me, he's probably the nearest to a real deal that the Tory party have. How would you feel about that?
Well, speaking honestly, because you've asked me to, Robert has been on a bit of a journey. Don't forget, he was, when I first knew him, he seemed to be on the left of the party, and then all of a sudden he appears to be on the right of the party, whereas I think Kemi has consistently been covering the same territory as she always has been. I thought she did splendidly well when she put up for the leadership the first time round, and I think she deserves a chance. Now, the party has actually elected her, and so let's give her a chance. Let's see how she performs. Initially, don't forget, she was coming up with no policies, Jeremy, and then all of a sudden we heard her views on immigration, and anybody who is an illegal immigrant in this country who commits a crime is now going to be sent straight back home. Well, I think we should be even stronger than that, and anybody who enters the country illegally, that should be a crime in itself.
Absolutely.
I mean,
here.
If you're coming in as an asylum seeker...
Why didn't you do that for 14 years then? Serious, straight question,
and that's what they should have been. That's what the party should be doing, and I understand that that's what they do in other countries around the world. We need to show strength and resilience, and unless we do, we're going to be seen as an also-ran when the general election comes next time round. Anybody who thinks that we're at 121 seats, so we've hit the ground and there's only one way to go. No, there's not. You find in lots of places that where there's a ground, there's also a basement. And in some cases, there's something below the basement. And that's where we could end up unless we start to offer the country a real alternative. Is
she the person for the job, Nige? Is she the person for the job?
Yes, she is. But I think that she needs to seek some better advice from other people, maybe a wider circulation of people that she's got around her, and that she has not got that luxury of just laying back and going, oh, where did we go wrong? And I wonder where we ought to be going now. I think it was bleeding obvious where we went wrong, and it's bleeding obvious where we ought to be going.
Couldn't agree more. I'd love your take. The shackles are off, Nigel Evans. He's out of that little chef kitchen. There are one or two stories today, mate, that genuinely make my skin crawl, and I never would find myself supporting a Labour cabinet minister. But Shabana Mahmood, take a bow. This sentencing council rubbish is an embarrassment to this country. For those of you who don't know this, the sentencing council, which was set up under Blair, created a sort of edit a couple of weeks ago when it said to judges, when you're passing sentence on criminals who have committed crime, by the way, if they come from an ethnic minority or a sexual minority or a religious minority, you need to be softer when you sentence them. She quite rightly went, that's ludicrous, that's two-tier justice. They snapped back and said it's nothing to do with her. If this was America, Trump would have sacked these idiots straight away. Nigel, can you explain to the British public listening to this programme how the hell this country has people like that, mate? That's an embarrassment, man. That's saying that's like that Isla Bryson in Scotland who raped two women, put a wig on and a skirt, and imagined that he could get away with rape by going to a female prison. That's just a con, isn't it?
I take my hat off to Shabana Mahmood. She is speaking not on behalf of the country, but on behalf of justice as well. Jeremy, I remember when justice was blind. It was blind justice, right? It didn't look to see who you were or what you were. This is the crime, did you do it?
Yeah.
And if you're found guilty, the sentence is meted out. And to think that there's going to be two-tier sentencing, it's bad enough having two-tier policing, but two-tier sentencing as well is a slap in the face of justice in this country. And I think the minister is absolutely right to tell them to look again, and I understand that's what she's going to do. And I think that if the sentencing body carries on in the same vein that they are, ignoring common sense and ignoring the minister, I think that the government needs to legislate.
And actually, I think if they did legislate, it would be cross-party agreement. I think it'd be through in about half an hour. Can I take your take on this latest Labour farmland grab? I think the way this government's treated what I call really sort of central parts of our being, pensioners, veterans, farmers. The tractor tax is bad enough. This latest plan from our Ange is, under her planning and infrastructure bill, is to say to farmers, if I want to build houses on your land, I'm going to just give you the price that I think and you can sod off. I am all, by the way, for building houses. I have two things to say, though. I've no time for the MPs who go, we need more houses, but not in my constituency. But surely, Nigel Evans, the real way to solve the problem, apart to find brown lands or areas, is to close the borders so that we don't have to build houses for people who shouldn't be here in the first place. Yes or no?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I believe that since 2010 to 2024, we had something like 5 million people coming into the United Kingdom. It's no wonder that we need to build more houses. If we got control of our own borders, which I thought was what Brexit was all about, then we wouldn't need to build these houses. But I like what one of your callers said earlier on. Maybe the farmers ought to go to the European Convention of Human Rights and say that they are being downtrodden by the government.
I don't understand, actually. I mean, not that I understand much about the Labour Party, but if you take on pensioners, veterans and farmers who provide the food we all eat, for goodness sake, the idiots in number 10, where do they imagine? I mean, you were the Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. That's not sensible. That's picking fights you don't necessarily have to have. Is that out of... Is it blind power because you've got a 180-seat majority? Is it a lack of political nous? What is it? Because it doesn't make sense.
Well, they've had a lack of political nous ever since they took control of Downing Street. Don't forget the first group of people they picked on were the pensioners when they took away their winter fuel allowance, and it just went on from there and there and there, and then the waspy women. And so the farmers are just one group of people amongst many that have been basically beaten up by a government that said they look after them. So I think they got it wrong. Listen, I wasn't just Deputy Speaker. I represented a part of Lancashire, which we had 800 farms. There. Farming is vitally important, not just for providing food, but for the environment, for tourism within the area. People don't want to come to the Ribble Valley to look at housing estates. They come to look at the open countryside, and we've got to protect that. And you can't have people like Angela Rayner riding roughshod over our beautiful open countryside and saying, right, that's where we're going to build 1,000 houses. And we don't care what local democracy says, and we don't care about the injustice of saying to farmers, and by the way, I know that this land would be worth 10 million if you sold it for planning, which you wouldn't have got before we became the government, but we're only going to give you 2 million for it. I mean, no, it's completely illogical. And as I said, I love the idea that our farmers should go to the European Convention on Human Rights and say, we are literally being strung up to dry by our own government. We need protection.
So good to have you on. Just one final thing. St John's Ambulance released an edit saying that when you're giving CPR to a woman, you can't say, lady, I'm giving you CPR. It's a person with breasts. Are you pregnant at all? Do you want to talk about that? Are you breastfeeding at this moment in time?
I tell you what, that is... Listen, if you are giving... You're talking about mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody who is lying on the floor, about to be within seconds of dying, would care what they were called. They just want the person who is above them to get on with the mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. It's bonkers.
I love you, Nigel Evans. I love you. I'm gonna do a stand-up tour with you and Sir John Redwood, free of the shackles of office. You're brilliant. Have a great evening. Appreciate you being on. Ex-Deputy Speaker of the Commons, former Conservative MP for the Ribble Valley, the excellent Nigel Evans. Great to have him on.